I don't think that there's any forensic evidence whatsoever to like convict Cosby.
Cosby had like some 20 plus accusers come out that were all telling a pretty similar story about him, no? Was she was willing to make statements for the prosecution in a criminal case, but I think the prosecutor didn't think that she was credible enough for any of those statements to stand.
It's almost like people are literally trying to assume that it's a roofie, like a roofie, when it clearly isn't.
Do you think that no amount of testimony should ever convict a person like that?
The other thing that you had called me racist for.
Uh-oh. There were multiple racist.
Yes, there was.
Okay.
The first time where you actually said you're racist was when you asked me, do I think that Casey Anthony was guilty? We were talking about Cosby and how the lack of forensic evidence in order to actually say that he's guilty. And I was saying that...
Which one? Is Casey Anthony the white woman that killed her kids?
Mm-hmm. Her kid, her one child.
Oh, it was just one, okay.
Yeah. And you would in the Casey... And so I felt like she got away. She got off with it.
You felt she's guilty, right?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I think and it's not just me. 66% of Americans think that she's guilty.
Sure, okay.
Right? Because all of the evidence. She lied from the very beginning. They found the DNA of the kid in the trunk of her car.
There were search results for where do I hide my dead child?
Right, in her search.
It was unreal, yeah.
She had talked about, I took my kid here. She literally made up an individual. This person has been watching my kid and that person didn't even exist.
Yeah.
And so literally every piece of evidence whatsoever pointed towards the idea that she clearly did something to this kid. Literally waited 2 weeks before she actually even, about a month before she searched for the kid.
I thought it was just somebody else, yeah.
Right, it was wild as freak. And her mother was the one that finally said, I'm calling the police. And it was wild. So I think the idea that I can say something like Cosby, I don't think that there's any forensic evidence whatsoever to convict Cosby, while simultaneously saying that I think Casey Anthony is guilty. I don't think that makes me racist at all.
We're going to have to revisit the conversation because it felt like Cosby had some 20 plus accusers come out that were all telling a pretty similar story about him, no? In terms of drugging people.
Yep.
It felt pretty clear. What was he actually convicted on?
Oh, I don't remember the exact charges, but it was basically for rape, for sexual,
I would have to go back and look
assault.
it up. I'm curious. Did it go? It went to trial, right? There was no plea. Yeah. Okay.
Erroneously went to trial because it wasn't supposed to be able to go to trial, right? Because
everything got overturned because I think some of the key statements that they were relying on had from a prior trial prosecution had been agreed to have been tossed. So Cosby's completely in the clear right now, right?
Yes, he is. Well, they're trying to retry him for some other stuff, but for the thing that he served 3 years for, despite his obvious wealth, was absolutely clearly something that he shouldn't have been able to be charged for. The original attorney, district attorney, Bruce Castor.
Due to the legal process, probably true, yeah.
Sure, but let's talk about that legal process just a tiny bit. So Bruce Castor was the original prosecutor who was in charge of this Cosby thing and did the initial investigation. He, being the district attorney, literally said there's zero forensic evidence with which to convict Cosby. So because of that, I don't think that it's appropriate to. I'm not even going to pursue this case.
I think
but then he hold on. Then what he went on to say was, but. Maybe I can get Andrea Constrand some justice by helping her to be able to get a civil thing. So what I'll do is I'll do a deposition with Cosby and we'll ask him specific questions. And because of the fact that we know that he won't be tried criminally, then he can't use the Fifth Amendment. And so then that way he has to testify and answer questions. And that way she can get a civil justice.
Yeah, because I think the idea was she was willing to make statements for the prosecution in a criminal case, but I think the prosecutor didn't think that she was credible enough for any of those statements to stand, and Cosby would end up walking on everything.
Yeah,
so they opted to not do the criminal thing and then did go the civil route. Yeah, and then those statements were brought back for the criminal trial now, which I have no idea how or why they did that.
But. Oh, it's 100% illegal. And what was crazy about it, I can't remember what the second prosecutor's name was. I want to say Kenneth or I can't remember. But in any case, that guy, he was trying the case. It was part of what he ran on when he was running on it. And Bruce Castor, the previous district attorney, directly emailed him and said, hey, just so you know, you can't use this thing. None of this has worked. And he said specifically, when he was the district attorney, I don't think, one, because of the fact that there's literally zero forensic evidence to convict Cosby, and the inconsistency of her testimony, because she had like changed the story quite a few times, there's almost, it's impossible to actually get a conviction for him. So it's probably better we just kind of leave it to civil, because obviously, you don't have to try as hard, and so on and so forth. And then they did that, and there was like a really a settlement. So for me, my entire statement this entire time has been that I don't think that, one, there's clearly not any forensic evidence. That's just in line with what Bruce Castor said.
Sure, I agree with that. It seemed to be the case that I think the closest I could come to meeting you was that maybe this type of kind of like quasi drug date rape was like really common back then. So maybe Cosby wasn't like a standout rapist, but it seemed like there was so much testimony from so many people that seemed to tell similar stories about Cosby kind of like pushing somebody to have a drink or a relaxant that would end up in sex. There's probably something there that you shouldn't have been.
Well, sure, that story happened, but that story happened after the initial story already existed, in which some person came forward with this. So it wasn't like all these people came forward and like, oh, hey, this is a story, and we all happen to be telling the same story, like without any foreknowledge of the pre-existing story in which there's a conviction. Like, no, this is like the story is already out, in which this is the going narrative, and now you have a bunch of people saying, oh, me too. For example, I could come forward with the story myself and say, Cosby raped me.
There, but I feel like people dig pretty hard into people's backgrounds to check for credibility on this, because I know when Biden had his story with the crazy lady, what was her name?
I don't remember. I was going to say Stormy Daniels. That's not her.
Absolutely
that's Trump.
There was the lady that accused Biden
I know what you're talking about, though, yeah.
Yeah, of like fingering her in the hallway, basically. And a couple other people tried to come out and say, oh, Biden did this to me as well. But none of that, like the timelines didn't match up. The accusations didn't match up. Like none of that seemed to be the case. Well, and it seemed like that would have been a person where, oh, okay, well, this is where somebody's highly incentivized to come out and say, oh, Biden raped me too. And it never seemed to materialize like the Cosby stuff did.
That's a beautiful point. I think it's really it's really demonstrates exactly what part of my problem was, right? When it came to like cases like the Biden situation, there was a very hefty investigation into the individuals, right? When it came to Bill Cosby, again, what we did, it felt like a gish gallop to guilty. And the reason why I say that is because a bunch of the individuals that came forward, like some of the lead people who were like having accusations, like completely changed their stories. For example, Janice Dickinson, she wrote an entire book, a memoir. And in the memoir, she claimed, oh, yeah, no, this is what happened. I went to his house. I willingly took Quaaludes, blah, blah, blah. Everything was good. Then afterwards, then she was on the stand saying, no, he put them in. I didn't know that I was going to be taking the Quaaludes and yada, 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 yada. So when she's pressed on that, then she makes a statement, well, I know what I'm telling you now. I know what I wrote in that book, and there was pressure, and I was in financial straits, and that's why I felt pressure to write the book, and and I was trying to sell, like, because I needed the money for my kids. Like, so it's like, so you have these financial incentives, and when we find out, like now, that plenty of these people recognize that there were settlement lawsuits that were coming from Bill Cosby's team, they recognize that they were getting, like, paid. There was paid documentaries and paid interviews on all of these different shows for them to whatever testify. There's all of this motive, and again, the only thing that we have is a testimony that happens to be like corroborate what the other person was saying, but was with foreknowledge of what the original thing is. So for my statement that I don't think that we can say with certainty that he's guilty, and that the only thing that we have on is just a number of people who are testifying, despite the fact that we have zero forensic evidence for any of them, and there's plenty of motive for them to lie.
Here's a question: do you think that for prior rapes where no forensic evidence can be collected, do you think that no amount of testimony should ever convict a person like that? Do you think that charges should have been brought forth? Let's say right now 10 people came out and they said that when I was 20 and when Stephen was 20, he raped me. 20 people came out and they all said that or whatever. Do you think that I should be beyond conviction at that point, since there's no chance of any forensic evidence or any circumstantial, no camera, no direct anything?
Sure. So I guess the question I would ask, or the way I would respond to that, is I would say, do you think, given that circumstance, that there's reasonable doubt? Given the complete absence of any forensic evidence whatsoever, is there reasonable doubt?
Well, I'm asking you. Why are you asking me?
Well, obviously, I believe so. Do you think so?
You think that that person should never be convicted?
I would say, in complete absence of any forensic evidence, I think that there is reasonable doubt, and I think our criminal justice system says that a person is guilty unless they are guilty beyond. A person is innocent unless they're guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. And so I would ask the question. So I've answered your question, and now I'm going to ask you: do you think that the total absence of any forensic evidence is reasonable doubt?
I would probably agree with you.
Okay, so then we probably should, so we agree that we shouldn't convict a person when there's complete absence.
When you have only witness, unless it have to be really compelling witness testimony, ideally from non-victims as well. But
Sure.
Even at that, it's pretty difficult. Yeah,
yeah, that's really, really hard.
Yeah.
And I think so. Then I think we kind of agree about the Cosby issue.
I think I would just have to go back. We would have to look at like the actual like stories or the accounts of all the Cosby people. The way that I kind of look at the prior rape or sex things is every now and then, when the Me Too stuff was getting big, there would be like a person as like one accuser come out, and like that's it. And it seems like, okay.
Sure.
But then sometimes somebody would have like one or two and then 5 more and then 20 more. And it's like, okay, this motherfucker was probably up to some shady shit. And I think that's generally how I feel about it. Now, in terms of like, did Bill Cosby, sneak some drugs to some women and try to fuck them that way? Based on what I remember seeing, it seems like the answer to that is probably yes. That's probably a fundamentally different question than like, should Cosby be convicted of rape or sexual assault? That's a much harder one because I find it hard to believe that you could get past that reasonable doubt threshold without any direct or circumstantial evidence about what happened.
When you say probably yes, that he like intentionally gave women Quaaludes without their knowledge or whatever, like what is that probability based on?
Because I feel like, and I have to be honest, I don't remember. I would have to go back and read through all of the testimony because this is a few years. Was this like 4 or 5 years ago?
Sure, I want to say probably yes, but sure.
I feel like there were multiple accounts of women coming on giving like a pretty similar setup in terms of like how we'd approach them and in terms of like not remembering things or feeling like they must have been drugged or whatever. It felt like that was a pretty consistent story that I heard. So it
but
seemed
that
like
was something that had already been reported in the media. Can you understand, like, do you think it's reasonable to say that it's possible for women to have a story, to recognize that there's financial benefit, like in order for them to tell
I understand what you're saying
story?
there. That could exist. It felt like there were other celebrities where that didn't happen. Where like 1 or 2 accusations come, it's like, oh well, where are all the other people lining up to get their checks or whatever?
Well, the thing is, I mean, I don't know. I think Cosby was in a different kind of situation. Like Gloria Allred was intentionally like looking for more people. Like they had put out plenty of calls, like to get more women to testify. It was like literally like on all the headlines because obviously Cosby was like America's dad or whatever they were calling him at that point. So he was such a humongous figure, significantly more wealthy than a lot of his counterparts, and so then there's this complete.
Wouldn't there be like counter push there too though? Because like, damn, do you really want to be the black woman that falsely accuses?
The vast majority of the women weren't black.
What?
It was almost all white women.
Okay.
There was like one woman who was like Creole and something else, but like and then
majority of the accusers were white.
Yeah, like 95, and then one of the people who was incredibly white, like they literally put box braids on her hair and like literally dark makeup and was like trying to pass her off as black, and it was like, wait, you're a very white woman in this situation. It was wild. It was wild as freak, and they were doing that in order to distance the obvious racial element of it's just a gang of white women accusing this black man, saying that I didn't believe the system was going to believe me in the 80s and the 70s that a black man raped me. It's like, I don't know, bro. It was kind of hard.
Sure.
So,
all I'm going by is what I remember from like the reporters.
Sure.
I would have to go back and read all the testimony or whatever to see how consistent or how much changed over time or whatever.
Okay.
It's possible that maybe what you're describing is the case. Like there's a possibility that there's a world where a woman didn't want to say that she was forced and she actually was, and other people coming out emboldened her to tell her story.
That's possible.
There's also a world where she sees there's a lot of money on the table and potential publicity, and she decides to come out as well. So either of those are possible. I would have to go back and like reread like what were people saying at the time.
Sure. Can you tell me from this conversation anything that is indicative of some sort of racism that would be motivating me to have the position I have on Cosby?
No, but I don't remember it had to do something with like, because it feels like you take a contrary position on all of the popular rulings, because I think you also said OJ didn't do it either, which is what you believe as well.
I did, but I think R. Kelly did it.
Okay, well that's good.
Yeah, I said it in that conversation too. This is new information.
Okay, I have to go back and remember. But this is also combined with the dating take too, and I was like, I don't know.
Okay, so now that the dating thing is gone, and clearly with the Cosby situation, again, my view is in line with the original prosecutor, Castor, who literally said,
well,
no
in regards to the original woman accusing him, who was shoddy evidence chair.
Yeah, and there's been inconsistent testimonies on, like, obviously some of the lead witnesses, like Janice Dickinson, directly contradicting herself in her book and saying that she was writing the book specifically because she needed the money, and we've seen, like, almost the vast majority of these cases that are coming forward against Cosby were people who were, like, literally on, like, financial straits, and that was part of, like, the lure. Like a lot of them were dealing with Cosby specifically with the notion that he was going to enhance their career. And then we also recognize that like Quaaludes were an incredibly popular drug at the time. As soon as the allegations happened, Whitney Houston, Whoopi Goldberg, I don't know why that name came, immediately like said, we all took Quaaludes. I took Quaaludes during that time. It was a very common thing, like Yellow Jackets were in the 60s, right?
Sure.
So like this was a common thing. Like the idea that it has to have been done like to date rape women is completely unfounded, and it's almost like people are literally trying to assume assume that it's a roofie, like a roofalin, when it clearly isn't. They're not even remotely close to the same thing. And I think, yeah, there was an obvious media attention directed towards him. But again, I don't think, for example, I don't think that it's because Cosby's black that I would be defending him. Because again, I've always said R. Kelly should be getting the chair, right? So I don't think that's the case. I think, again, there was an original district attorney, the person who first got the case, who made that statement that he shouldn't be tried. And after that stuff became evident, once that stuff became apparent, then a whole bunch of people now aware of what Cosby testified to now have ammunition with which to give their arguments, because now you know he said that he did have prescriptions to Quaaludes with the intention of giving them to women. Now, nowhere did he say that I'm giving them to women to date rape them. I have these Quaaludes to give them to women. That'd be the equivalent of me saying, well, I'm not really much of a smoker, but I bring blunts specifically for my, for my intentions of when I have women over, and I know that
sure, maybe blunts aren't the exact comparison, but I understand what you mean.
Sure, like it's not indicative of some sort of malintent.
Sure, possibly, yeah.
Yeah. So okay, that racism is gone. I don't know, man. So I don't know. We got
Any other points?
I think for the Cosby and for the OJ thing, I think, man, it's really crazy. Just really briefly, he obviously was found not guilty by his peers, and I think part of the reason he was found not guilty was because there was no actual evidence, good evidence to suggest that whatever. There was obvious cases of tampering. And I know you're probably not particularly familiar with the OJ case, but you probably believe that OJ was guilty, right?
Based on the little bit I know about it, yeah.
Right. And so I think it would be crazy of me to say you're racist because you think OJ is guilty, despite the fact that he got off, right? I just juxtaposing what you think, that, it's 1 o'clock. It's juxtaposing you think that some white guy is innocent, and for example, I don't know, I don't have to think of a name, but you think OJ is guilty doesn't immediately indicate that you're, because
no, of course. My accusation was a pattern of things. It wasn't just one particular thing, of course.
Okay, and so now would you say that pattern is sufficiently absolved?
It's somewhat alleviated,
dissolved?
I'll say.
Huh?
Somewhat alleviated.
Okay.
You're down to a 1 out of 10 on the racist meter now.
Okay. All right. Well, okay. I deserve that one. Because what I say in my private speech,
you've used the N-word 4 times today, so, you're up there at least a little bit. So.